The unexpected return. Commander Area Blackwood hadn't seen the crystalline spires of New Haven Colony in 15 years. Now, as her ship descended through the lavender clouds of Kepler 186f, those same towers caught the light of the system's red dwarf star, sending prismatic reflections dancing across her viewport. She'd left this place as a teenager, following her father's mysterious reassignment to Earth. Now she was returning as one of the youngest commanders in the Terran fleet, with more questions than answers about why they'd really left. The landing pad materialized through the mist, a circular platform extending from one of the lower levels of the massive arcology that housed most of the colony's human population. As the ship's landing gear engaged with a soft thud, Aria caught her reflection in the polished surface of her control panel. At 32, her features had hardened from the soft curves of youth into the sharp angles of command, dark hair pulled back in a regulation braid, brown eyes carrying the weight of too many battles. "Welcome to New Haven Colony," the automated system chirped. "Please proceed to customs for processing." Aria grabbed her duffel bag, not bothering with the formal uniform jacket. The colony's tropical climate made such formalities impractical, leaving her in the standard-issue black tank top and cargo pants. As she descended the ramp, the familiar scent of night-blooming crystal flowers hit her nose, bringing with it a flood of memories she tried to forget. The customs area was nearly empty, typical for the colony's off-season. But something about the silence made the hair on the back of Aria's neck stand up. Years of combat experience had taught her to trust those instincts. She was being watched. "The prodigal daughter returns," a melodic voice called from the shadows. "Though I must say, the military look suits you better than those ridiculous pigtails you used to wear." Aria's hand instinctively moved to her sidearm as a figure stepped into the light. Her breath caught in her throat. Standing before her was a Keplerian, but not just any Keplerian. The being's crystalline skin caught the light like faceted diamond, shifting through shades of purple and blue. Delicate patterns traced their way across exposed arms, and a face that somehow managed to be both alien and heartbreakingly familiar. "Lyra," Aria whispered, her hand dropping from her weapon. The Keplerian's bioluminescent markings pulsed with amusement. "I'm touched you remember me, considering how quickly you disappeared without saying goodbye." Lyra Klar had been Aria's closest friend growing up, the daughter of the colony's Keplerian ambassador. They'd been inseparable despite their differences, two outcasts who found comfort in each other's company. But where Aria remembered a gangly adolescent struggling to control her bioluminescence, the being before her moved with liquid grace, every gesture precise and controlled. "It wasn't my choice," Aria said, fighting to keep her voice steady. "My father received orders directly from Earth Command." "Yes." Lyra's inner light dimmed slightly, or at least that's what they wanted everyone to believe. "But we both know there was more to it than that, don't we?" Aria felt her pulse quicken. "What do you mean?" Lyra glanced around the empty customs area, her crystalline features hardening. "Not here. Things have changed since you left Aria. The alliance between our peoples is fracturing. There are those who would prefer humans and Keplerians remain forever separate. The Integration Council is a puppet." Lyra cut her off. "But again, this isn't the place. Meet me at the old Crystal Gardens in 2 hours. Come alone and tell no one you saw me." She turned to leave, then paused. "And Aria, I truly am glad you're back. We have much to discuss about the night your family really left." Before Aria could respond, Lyra seemed to shimmer and fade into the shadows, a trick of Keplerian biology that Aria had forgotten they could perform. She stood alone in the customs area, her mind racing. She'd returned to New Haven on a routine diplomatic mission, or so her orders claimed. But Lyra's words confirmed what she'd suspected all along. There was nothing routine about this assignment. As she made her way through the colony's sprawling corridors, Aria couldn't shake the feeling that she'd stepped into something much bigger than a simple homecoming. The Crystal Gardens had been their special place as children, where they'd shared secrets and dreams, under the light of distant stars. Now it seemed those gardens might hold the key to understanding why her family had fled in the middle of the night 15 years ago, and why she'd been drawn back to this place after all this time. The real question was she ready for the truth? Hidden truths. The crystal gardens hadn't changed in 15 years. Towering formations of living crystal stretched toward the biodome's transparent ceiling, their surfaces catching the light of Kepler 186f's setting sun. Aria walked among the crystalline structures, memories flooding back with each step. Here was where she and Lyra had built their secret fort. There was the formation they'd named the Star Bridge because it looked like a path to the heavens. Her hand brushed against a smaller crystal cluster, and it responded to her touch with a soft purple glow. She jerked back, startled. The crystals weren't supposed to react to human contact. That was a uniquely Keplerian trait. Interesting, isn't it? Lyra's voice came from behind her. The crystals remember you. Aria turned to find her childhood friend emerging from between two towering formations. In the garden's ethereal light, Lyra's crystalline form seemed to pulse with inner energy, her bioluminescent patterns creating complex designs across her skin. That's impossible, Aria said. The crystal matrices only respond to Keplerian biology. That's what we were all taught. Lyra approached, her movements fluid and graceful. But like many things in our shared history, it's a carefully constructed lie. She reached out and took Aria's hand, pressing it against the crystal formation. The entire structure lit up with brilliant purple light, patterns racing through its lattice like lightning through clouds. The display was beautiful, mesmerizing, and absolutely should not have been possible. How? Aria whispered. Your father discovered the truth, Lyra said, still holding Aria's hand against the crystal. 3 days before your family's sudden departure, he was working late in the xenobiology lab. He found something in the deep scans of Keplerian and human DNA, something that threatened everything we thought we knew about our species. A sound echoed through the garden. Footsteps. Lyra pulled Aria behind one of the larger formations, their bodies pressed close in the narrow space. Aria could feel the subtle vibration of Lyra's crystalline form, a sensation both alien and oddly familiar. Security patrols, Lyra whispered, her breath cool against Aria's ear. They're more frequent now. The council doesn't want anyone spending too much time in the gardens. Too many questions about why certain humans can interact with the crystals. The footsteps passed, but Lyra didn't move away. Instead, she reached up and traced a finger along Aria's jawline, leaving a trail of tingling sensation in its wake. You've changed, she murmured. Stronger, more focused, but your eyes are the same. Aria caught Lyra's hand, trying to ignore how right it felt in her own. Stop deflecting. What did my father find? Lyra's bioluminescent patterns shifted to a deeper blue, a sign of sorrow, Aria remembered. Genetic markers that shouldn't exist. Sequences that appeared in both our species, too similar to be coincidence. Your father believed, and my research since has confirmed, that humans and Keplerians share more than just this colony. We share ancestry. That's not possible, Aria protested, but even as she said it, pieces began falling into place. The way the crystals responded to her touch. The ease with which humans and Keplerians could communicate, despite their biological differences. The inexplicable feeling of connection she'd always felt with Lyra, beyond mere friendship. The Integration Council knows. Lyra continued. They've always known. Why do you think they're so insistent on keeping our peoples segregated while preaching unity? Why the strict controls on genetic research? They're afraid of what might happen if everyone learned the truth, that the barriers between our species are artificial constructs. More footsteps, closer now. Lyra's patterns pulsed with urgency. We don't have much time. Your father left something behind when you fled. Data crystals containing his research. I've spent years trying to find them. But they're locked with a genetic key. Your genetic key. Where? The old xenobiology lab. It's been sealed since that night, officially due to contamination. But I found a way in through the maintenance tunnels. Help me retrieve the data, Area. Help me expose the truth. Area studied her childhood friend's face, seeing the same determination she remembered from their youth. But there was something else too. Fear. What aren't you telling me, Lyra? What's really happening here? Lyra's patterns flickered with dark colors Area had never seen before. The Council is pushing for complete separation. They're going to force all humans to leave the colony, permanently. But that's just the beginning. There's talk of more extreme measures to ensure our species never contaminate each other again. They can't do that. The alliance treaties mean nothing to those who believe they're protecting the purity of both our races. Lyra's hand tightened on Area's. We have 3 days before they announce the evacuation. 3 days to find your father's research and prove that everything they've built their power on is a lie. Area felt the weight of command settling on her shoulders again. This wasn't just about solving the mystery of her family's departure anymore. It was about preventing a catastrophe that could tear apart both their worlds. The maintenance tunnels, she said. Show me. Lyra's patterns brightened with hope. Like old times. Breaking rules. Causing trouble. Despite the gravity of the situation, Area felt herself smile. Like old times. But this time, we're saving more than just ourselves. They moved through the crystal garden like shadows, 2 beings from supposedly separate species united by a shared purpose and a connection that defied explanation. Above them, through the biodome's transparent panels, the first stars of evening began to appear, distant suns that might hold more answers about their shared past. And somewhere in the sealed darkness of the xenobiology lab, proof waited to be discovered, proof that could change everything. The chase begins. The maintenance tunnels beneath New Haven Colony were a maze of crystalline corridors and pulsing bioorganic conduits. Area followed Lyra through the network, their path illuminated by the Keplerian's natural bioluminescence and the occasional emergency light. The air grew thicker as they descended, heavy with the scent of mineral deposits and recycled atmosphere. The xenobiology lab should be just ahead, Lyra whispered, her patterns dimmed to their lowest setting. But we're not alone down here. As if on cue, voices echoed through the tunnels behind them. Life signs detected. 2 signatures, 1 human, 1 Keplerian. Proceeding to intercept. Integration security, Lyra hissed. They must have detected our biosignatures. Area's military training kicked in. Options. This way. Lyra grabbed her hand, pulling her into a narrow side tunnel. The crystal walls seemed to respond to their presence, subtle patterns of light following their movement. The crystals recognize our shared genetics. They're trying to help us hide. They emerged into a larger chamber filled with ancient maintenance equipment. Lyra pressed her hand against a seemingly solid wall, and a section of crystal shifted, revealing a hidden passage. How many other secrets does this colony have? Area asked, following her through. More than either of our governments want us to know. Lyra sealed the passage behind them. This entire section isn't on any official maps. It's part of the original colony structure, built before the Integration Council took control. The new tunnel was different from the others. Its walls were rougher, unrefined, with strange symbols etched into the crystal at regular intervals. Area ran her fingers over one, and it lit up with a soft blue glow. These markings, she said, they're not Keplerian or human. They're both, Lyra replied. And neither. Your father believed they were left by the first colonists, the true first colonists, from thousands of years ago, before our peoples were artificially separated. A distant explosion rocked the tunnel, sending crystalline dust raining down on them. They're using sonic charges to map the tunnel network, Area growled. Standard military sweep pattern. We need to move faster. They ran through the ancient passages, the crystal walls responding to their presence with increasing intensity. The symbols seemed to pulse in sequence, creating a path of light ahead of them. The lab entrance should be just ahead, Lyra said, her breathing heavy. But there's something you need to know before we... Another explosion, closer this time, cut her off. The tunnel wall beside them cracked, and through the opening, they could see integration security forces in their distinctive black armor approaching. "Halt," a mechanically enhanced voice commanded. "By order of the Integration Council, you are under arrest for violation of genetic segregation protocols." Arya pushed Lyra behind her, reaching for a weapon that wasn't there. She'd left her sidearm in her ship, not wanting to trigger colony security protocols. Any other hidden passages? Lyra's pattern swirled with anxiety. No, but she pressed her hand against the cracked wall. The crystals responded, not just with light but with movement. The entire section began to shift and reform, sealing the breach. "That's impossible," one of the security officers shouted. "Crystals don't respond to commands without proper interface technology." "They do when you ask nicely," Lyra said, a note of strain in her voice. Arya could see the effort it was taking her, the way her patterns flickered with exertion. The wall sealed completely, cutting off their pursuers. Lyra sagged against Arya, her crystalline form unusually warm to the touch. That took more energy than I expected." "What did you just do?" "Something that proved your father's theories correct. The crystals aren't just building materials. They're a technology left behind by our ancestors. A technology that responds to both our species because it was designed for both." More explosions echoed through the tunnels, but more distant now. Their pursuers would need time to find another route to their position. Arya supported Lyra as they continued toward the lab entrance. "Why didn't you tell me about this before?" Arya asked. "Would you have believed me?" Lyra's patterns had stabilized, but they were dimmer than usual. "That everything we know about our species is a lie. That the very foundations of our colony are built on technology we've been taught to believe is just lifeless crystal." They reached a sealed door marked with faded xenobiology symbols. Unlike the modern sections of the colony, this door was crude, obviously part of the original structure. "This is it," Lyra said. "Your father's lab. Everything we need to expose the truth is inside." "But Arya..." She turned, her crystalline features catching the light in ways that made Arya's heart skip. "Once we open this door, there's no going back. The Council will do anything to keep these secrets buried." Arya thought of her father's hasty departure 15 years ago, of the lies she'd been told her entire military career, of the connection she'd always felt with Lyra that defied explanation. She thought of the Integration Council's plans for forced separation, and of the ancient symbols in the tunnels that suggested a very different history than the one they'd been taught. "I'm done with secrets," she said, placing her hand on the door's crystal scanner. "Let's see what my father thought was worth abandoning everything to protect." The scanner hummed to life, reading her genetic signature. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, with a sound like singing crystal, the ancient door began to open, revealing a darkness that held answers they'd both spent years searching for. Behind them, the sounds of pursuit grew closer. Ahead lay mysteries that could reshape both their worlds. Arya felt Lyra's hand slip into hers, their fingers intertwining naturally, despite their biological differences. Together, they stepped into the darkness, ready to uncover truths that had been buried for generations. Legacy of the Stars. The Xenobiology Lab was a time capsule frozen in the moment of her father's departure. Holographic displays still flickered weakly, casting ghostly blue light across abandoned workstations. Specimen containers lined the walls, their contents preserved in stasis fields that had somehow maintained power for 15 years. "The backup generators," Lyra explained, her natural glow providing additional illumination. "They're powered by the same crystal technology as the tunnels, self-sustaining, nearly eternal." Arya moved through the lab, memories surfacing with each step. She'd spent countless hours here as a child, watching her father work while pretending to do her homework. Now she saw the room with new eyes, noticing details that her younger self had missed. The specimens weren't just random samples. They told a story of systematic comparison between human and Keplerian biology. "Here," Lyra said, approaching a sealed workstation. "This is where your father made the discovery." The workstation's crystal interface responded immediately to Aria's touch, screens shimmering to life with streams of genetic data. But something was wrong. The displays were corrupted, fragments of information scattered across multiple systems. "No," Lyra's patterns pulsed with distress. "Someone's been here before us. They've tried to destroy the data." Aria studied the fragmented displays. "Not destroy," she said. "Decrypt. Look at the pattern. It's not corruption. It's a security measure. My father scattered the data across multiple systems, each piece keyed to different genetic markers." A distant boom shook the lab, sending dust cascading from the ceiling. Their pursuers were getting closer. "Can you recover it?" Aria's hands moved across the crystal interface, muscle memory taking over. "Maybe. He taught me his backup protocols, said I might need them someday. I never understood what he meant until now." The genetic scanner hummed to life, reading both their biological signatures simultaneously. The corrupted displays began to shift, fragments of data realigning like pieces of a puzzle. "It's working," Lyra breathed, leaning close to watch. Her crystalline form brushed against Aria's shoulder, sending tingles of energy through the contact point. "But why does it need both our signatures?" "Because the truth needs both perspectives to be complete," a new voice said from the darkness. They spun around. A figure emerged from the shadows of the lab's far corner. Tall, elderly, his skin bearing the telltale crystalline patterns of a Keplerian, but arranged in a way neither of them had seen before. "Director Thaler," Lyra gasped. "But you're supposed to be dead." The old Keplerian's patterns flickered with amusement. "Like so many things the Council tells us, that too was a lie. Though I suspect you've both learned quite a bit about lies recently." Aria stepped forward, positioning herself between Lyra and the newcomer. "You knew my father." "Knew him? My dear, I helped him make the discovery that changed everything." Thaler moved closer, his crystalline features catching the light from the displays. "Though perhaps discovery is the wrong word. We didn't discover anything new. We simply remembered what had been deliberately forgotten." Another explosion rocked the lab. "Closer now." Thaler glanced at the ceiling. "We don't have much time. The data your father scattered, it's not just research. It's history. Our true history." The workstation chimed, the final pieces of data falling into place. The screens filled with images that took Aria's breath away. Ancient starships built of living crystal, crews of humans and Keplerians working together, children who bore characteristics of both species. "We were one people once," Thaler said softly. "The crystals that build this colony, that respond to both your touches, they're not just technology. They're a legacy left by a civilization that understood there is strength in unity, in the blending of differences." "But why hide it?" Aria asked. "Why erase all trace of this history?" "Power," Lyra answered, her patterns dark with anger. "The Integration Council maintains control by keeping our people separate while pretending to promote unity. If everyone knew the truth, there would be no justification for their authority." Thaler finished. "No reason to maintain the artificial barriers they've built between our species. Your father discovered proof of ongoing genetic compatibility, evidence that humans and Keplerians could still." He trailed off as Lyra's patterns flushed with color, and Aria felt heat rise to her own cheeks. The connection she'd always felt with Lyra suddenly took on new meaning. The lab's entrance exploded inward, filling the air with crystalline shards. Integration security forces poured through the breach, weapons raised. "Director Thaler," a mechanically enhanced voice announced, "by order of the Integration Council, you and your conspirators are under arrest for crimes against genetic purity." Thaler's patterns pulsed with defiance. "You can't stop the truth forever. It's in our very genes, in the crystals themselves. We remember what you made us forget." "The crystals," Lyra whispered to Aria. "If they really are ancient technology, Arya understood immediately. She pressed her hand against the nearest crystal formation, feeling Lyra's hand cover hers. Together, they reached out to the living crystal network that pervaded the entire colony. The response was immediate and overwhelming. The lab's crystals began to pulse with brilliant light, patterns racing through their lattices like lightning. The security forces stepped back, their weapons wavering. Impossible, one of them breathed. But it wasn't impossible. It was memory. Genetic memory awakening after millennia of enforced sleep. As the light spread through the colony's crystal network, Arya knew that nothing would ever be the same. The truth was finally breaking free. Revolution's dawn. The crystal network pulsed with power, sending waves of light cascading through New Haven Colony's entire infrastructure. In the xenobiology lab, Arya and Lyra maintained their connection to the ancient technology, their combined touch awakening something that had slept for millennia. Through the crystal matrix, they could feel the colony itself becoming aware, remembering its original purpose. Security override in progress. The colony's automated system announced, its usual chirp replaced by something older, deeper, restoring original protocols. The integration security forces found their weapons powering down, the crystal-based technology responding to commands they couldn't override. Director Thaler stepped forward, his aged crystalline features radiant in the awakening light. "You see," he addressed the security forces, "the very foundations of this colony reject your artificial divisions. The crystals remember what we were meant to be." Through the lab's shattered entrance, they could hear confusion spreading throughout the colony. The crystal walls everywhere were coming alive, displaying ancient images and text, the true history of their peoples written in light and memory. "Commander," one of the security officers removed his helmet, revealing features that mixed human and Keplerian characteristics. I think I remember. My grandmother used to tell stories, legends about our true origins. We thought they were just fairy tales." More security forces lowered their weapons, their certainty crumbling in the face of undeniable truth. But not everyone was ready to accept change. "This is treason." A figure in elaborate ceremonial armor pushed through the crowd. High Counselor Venn, his crystalline features twisted with rage. "These criminals have activated forbidden technology. They must be terminated before." His words cut off as the crystal wall behind him shifted, forming a containment field. Similar fields appeared around the few security officers who still held their weapons raised. "The colony is protecting us," Lyra said, her patterns pulsing with wonder. "It recognizes hostile intent." Through their connection to the crystal network, Arya could feel the truth of those words. The colony wasn't just a collection of buildings and technology. It was a living record of their shared history, designed to preserve and protect the unity of both species. "Your father knew this would happen," Thaler said to Arya. "He knew that once the truth was revealed, it couldn't be contained. That's why they forced him to leave, but not before he could plant the seeds of revelation." High Counselor Venn struggled against his crystal prison. "You don't understand what you're doing. The separation protocols exist for a reason. Without them, without control, people might choose their own path." Lyra challenged, "Might follow their hearts instead of your arbitrary rules." Her patterns swirled with emotion as she turned to Arya. In the glow of the awakened crystals, every facet of her crystalline form seemed to shine with inner light. "Like I did, every day since you left, waiting for the chance to show you the truth, about our peoples, about us." Arya's free hand rose to cup Lyra's face, thumb tracing the luminescent patterns that had fascinated her since childhood. "I think I always knew. Every time I tried to connect with someone else, human or otherwise, nothing felt right. No one felt like home." The crystal network pulsed stronger, responding to their emotional connection. Throughout the colony, similar scenes were playing out as humans and Keplerians recognized the artificial nature of the barriers between them. Generations of carefully constructed separation were crumbling in the face of remembered truth. "It's happening everywhere," one of the friendly security officers reported, checking his communications display. The crystal networks in other colonies are awakening too. The Integration Council's control is breaking down across the sector. Director Thaler's patterns glowed with satisfaction. A chain reaction of remembrance. Once one colony awakens, the others feel it through the deep crystal networks. Your father theorized this might happen, but even he couldn't be certain. Speaking of certainty, Lyra said, her patterns shifting to display both anxiety and hope. What happens now? After generations of separation, our peoples have a lot to relearn about each other. Arya smiled, remembering all the childhood moments that suddenly made more sense. The ease of their friendship, the deep connection that transcended species, the way they'd always understood each other without words. We learn together, she said, squeezing Lyra's hand. We remember what our ancestors knew, that our differences make us stronger, not weaker. That love doesn't care about genetic protocols or artificial barriers. The crystal networks hummed with approval, their light taking on a warm, rosy hue. Around them, security forces were helping to free their detained colleagues, humans and Keplerians working together as if they'd never been taught to stay apart. High Counselor Venn and his few remaining loyalists were secured for trial, though Arya suspected their punishment would focus on rehabilitation rather than retribution. After all, they too were victims of the lie, trapped in old fears and false beliefs. Your father would be proud, Thaler said softly. Both of your fathers would be, he added, looking at Lyra. They tried to protect this truth until the time was right. Until there were people strong enough to bear it. Arya felt Lyra's arm slip around her waist, their bodies fitting together as naturally as they had in the maintenance tunnels. So, Lyra's patterns sparkled with mischief. Does this mean I can finally take you on a proper date without worrying about genetic segregation protocols? Arya laughed, the sound echoing through the awakened crystal chambers of their ancestors. I think we got some lost time to make up for. Above them, through the colony's crystal dome, the light of distant stars shone down on a people remembering who they truly were. Not separate species forced into reluctant cooperation, but the descendants of a civilization that had understood a fundamental truth, that love, understanding, and unity were written into the very crystals of their world, waiting to be remembered. The revolution their ancestors had planned, that their fathers had protected, and that they had finally triggered, wasn't one of violence or destruction. It was a revolution of remembrance, of awakening, of barriers falling away to reveal the connections that had always existed. As Arya and Lyra stepped out of the lab together, they knew their journey was just beginning. There would be challenges ahead as their peoples relearned how to truly live together. But with the wisdom of their ancestors flowing through the living crystals of their world, and with their love lighting the way, the future had never looked brighter.